If your spouse died tomorrow, what would your Social Security income be the following month? Not the two checks combined, but the one income that is left coming from Social Security. I know it's a disturbing question to ask. It's got to be a disturbing question to think about, but Social Security operates that way. And in year 3 or 3 years away from retirement, that is when you start to build the defenses for things like Social Security and income if one of you were not to be here. Hi, I'm Will Hoffman, founder and president of Hoffman Wealth Management, and this is Pre-Retirement Navigated. This entire show lives within the 5 years before retirement begins and all of the decisions that are made in that window. Because what you decide here doesn't just it's not a number on a statement. It's not an investment return. These are the decisions that sets how secure your retirement feels, how much room you have to maneuver during retirement and change your mind, and how much of it you actually get to enjoy. There's so much that goes on in these 5 years that unfortunately folks ignore. They don't think about. We've already talked about what the whole entire landscape of this show is going to be in the 5 or 6 flips that change. And we're going to go way, way deeper as this show progresses into the individual decisions that need to be made, things that need to be considered. Right now, we're just highlighting the things to do in the years leading up to retirement. But we've covered so much already. Year 5, how important it is to pick a date, 4 years out, understanding what the tax scenarios look like. And here, when we start talking about year 3, we're going to start talking about building the defenses, fortifying the dam, and understanding what happens and why these things are so important. Because any sports enthusiasts out there are going to know that sometimes the best offense is a good defense. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we get to discuss these things. As always, if you have any questions, all of our contact information is going to be in the show description and in the show notes. So please feel free to reach out if there's anything in here that you'd like us to go deeper on, or if you would like to talk about your individual situation. There is a link to book a call directly with our office where you can hear about our navigation formula and understand why these steps are so important and why that navigation formula is what we put our clients through when they're going through this. There's also a link to a pre-retirement checklist. That's where all of the things we're going to be discussing live. So feel free to download that. That way you can see exactly where you stand in these 5 years leading up to retirement, what decisions you've already made, what things you've already decided, and what is still left to do and to uncover before you tell your boss, this is it, I'm done, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life and retire. So today, year 3, defense year. The foundation is set, tax plans in motion. You've picked the date and the time frame with which you want to retire. And now 3 years out, it's when we start modeling scenarios and understanding what choices still need to be made. We are modeling income scenarios. We are modeling Social Security decisions because most couples have never run a lot of these scenarios. They've run the ideal scenario. This is what both of our Social Securities look like. This is how much in assets that we have. And this is what our income will be as we head into retirement. And that scenario is important. Don't get me wrong. But there's 2 other scenarios that you need to understand. What happens if the higher income earner passes way earlier than expected? Which check is going to end coming from Social Security? Also, if there's pension checks that are going to end, we need to understand those things. And then what happens if the lower earner passes? Which income stops? What income continues? All of those things are so, so important to understand. But most folks only model the first. We're going to get into that. Most couples have never run those other 2 scenarios. The mechanism is when one spouse dies, one check stops. Social Security Administration is pretty unforgiving in that scenario. One of them is going to stop. They're even so cruel that they're going to recapture some of the money. If there was anything pro rata that needs to be recaptured, they're going to recapture that when someone passes away. So we need to understand whose check is going to stop and why, and the talking points there. Again, this one decision is going to be an entirely deeper episode, but year 3 is when you want to start modeling this. Some statistics for us to understand. First, listen, Social Security, the decision-making process is not lost on us. I know that there's plenty of calculators out there that can help you model what the ideal scenario is. I'm here to tell you that with longevity being what it is right now in the United States, we're living longer, we're having longer retirements. All of those calculators are going to tell you that one of you, typically the higher income earner, delaying till age 70 to take your Social Security is going to be the choice that you should make. I'm also going to tell you that after doing this for 23 years and sitting with people time after time after time, making this decision, nobody makes that decision to wait till 70. And I get it. It's not lost on me. That Social Security income is money that we have contributed. We have paid these FICA taxes our entire careers. If you're a business owner, you've paid both sides of this FICA tax for your entire existence. And now it's time to claim that. And we all look at that and say the same thing. What if I don't make it? What happens to the money that I've contributed into this system? I want that money back, and I want it back as soon as possible. I can't argue that logic. As someone who pays both sides of that as a business owner, I'm telling you, I want my money back as quickly as possible too. So that logic is not lost on us. However, we do need to understand what happens when one of us passes away. We may still make the choice to take the earlier or take Social Security earlier, merely because we want to get that money back. But just some statistics that kind of support the data that you may have seen, and looked at that calculator online and said, I'm not waiting till 70, clicked off and moved along with your day. If you claim at age 62, the maximum benefit is $2,669 a month. If you wait till 70, that maximum benefit right now is $5,181 a month. There's a difference of $2,212 a month. That is not double, but it's a lot. Leaving that on the table for a beneficiary when they're 80 or 85 and maybe live another decade is still getting your contributions back. So unfortunately, you won't be here to enjoy it. You may not be here to enjoy it, but it is still getting your contributions back. Just so you know, that break even age is 80 to 82. Again, so waiting till 70, getting to age 80 or 82 is in 2026 with the advances in modern medicine. It's not that unusual to make it to 80 to 82. And understanding all of that is so important when we sit down at the Social Security office when it's time to make that decision, and understanding that, because they're going to give you the options, and you're going to have that emotional attachment to getting your money back as soon as possible. But you may benefit from waiting. And let me rephrase that. Most of us will benefit because so many people make that retirement, that early decision, whether it's 62, whether it's full retirement age, which is 67 now, we want to get that back. In addition to that, the news makes us so nervous about the sustainability of Social Security. And we see those stories time after time again that Social Security is running out of money. The optimal age is going to get pushed up again. So we want to make sure that we're collecting and we're getting our checks as soon as possible. And that kind of fear drives us to make that decision. Again, it's going to be another video later in this process, but we want to make sure that benefit it's about 77% higher at 70 versus 62 is captured. Now, all that data comes from AARP. That break-even age comes from AARP. They wrote a nice article just in July of this year that talks about what the break-even age is for Social Security. So that's data. That's not a sales mechanism, which unfortunately can plague our profession sometimes, as folks hear that as a sales mechanism. But that's real, actual data. When you stop looking at those claims as two versions of the same claim and start seeing it as two different assignments, that's where this can be abundantly clear, so that after the first death, the first survivor or the survivor is left with the larger check and is left with still drawing the most out. And again, living to 95 is not uncommon anymore. When we sit down with couples that are retiring, we can't look at them as two 65-year-olds or two 62-year-olds. I have to sit there and look at one of them as a 92-year-old person. And we need to make sure that they are not eating green beans out of a can, that they are living a life that is sustainable, living a life that is tracking inflation so that their lifestyle can persist. That's what our profession is obligated to do, is to have that vision to not be sitting in front of two 62-year-olds who are trying to make the decision right now, but one 95-year-old. So if that lower earner's check is gone and the higher earner waited until 70 to claim, that leaves a substantial amount of income. And remember, with Social Security continues to get cost of living adjustment. It gives the survivor income that is tracking inflation, is keeping pace with inflation. So that's why understanding 70, making the decision to wait till 70, it's not fun. It's not fun sitting there waiting, wondering, is Social Security still going to be there? It's not sit there and wondering, am I still going to be here? But mathematically and philosophically, it does make sense to explore those options and understand the decisions that you are making. You have been driving hard on your career highway for decades. Foot on the gas, eyes straight ahead, on your way to retirement. But when you hit that 5-year stretch before retirement, every pothole seems a little bit deeper. Every traffic jam seems to last a little bit longer. Every construction zone seems to be a little bit more dangerous. And every change in lanes seems to be a bit more aggravating. You are not alone. That is exactly why we designed the navigation formula as our proprietary process at Hoffman Wealth Management, helping you navigate the time before retirement when all of these things start to stack up and these decisions start to seem a little bit more important. As you're listening to the Pre-Retirement Navigated podcast, if there's something that you have a question about, please feel free to book a discovery call with our office. The link is in the show notes, and you can always call and ask any questions you have about something you hear here. Now, back to the Pre-Retirement Navigated podcast. So we talked in the last episode about one of the things that blindsides folks the most is taxes. They think they're going to be in a lower tax bracket. They've been sold a bill of goods that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. And unfortunately, more times than not, they're not in a lower tax bracket. Some even end up in a higher tax bracket, especially when required minimum distributions start. But one of the most underestimated dangers in retirement is something called sequence of returns risk. And especially early retirement, but retirement in general. And it's why building the defenses is so important, because if you're drawing from a portfolio and the market is going down or the portfolio is going down, that can hurt if it's happening early in retirement. So building defenses against sequence of return risk are important. And I know when folks hear that, they start hearing, well, what product is going to solve that? They start hearing, what are you trying to sell me? What kind of product am I going to be buying? Because surely I can't protect against sequence of returns risk by just investing differently. And the answer is you can't. Really taking a look at what your income is that's fixed. Social Security, potential pensions, anything that's coming in on a fixed basis. And the difference between what your income coming in that's fixed and what your budget is your income gap. That income gap is what we need to protect. Because that income gap is what we're taking from your investments. It's what's coming from your IRA or 401k or your Roth IRA or non-qualified or brokerage accounts, maybe even savings. We have to protect that amount because that's the amount that's at risk if the market is to drop significantly while you start income. The solution is to just build the fortress around that gap, whether it is increasing the cash to protect that gap. You can still draw from your portfolio. If it's going up, market's doing well, draw from your portfolio. But the second that you start to get concerned about the market, or the second that we have those conversations with our clients, that's when we say, okay, let's use the cash. Market's going to do this. Listen, ideally, you've got a 30 to 40 year retirement. The market's going to do this, and it's going to do it more than once. It's going to go down. And we know history has told us the benefits of waiting out market fluctuations. It doesn't feel good. Our stomachs hurt. We're losing sleep at night, especially when we're retired, because that's our income. But if you build the fortress around that income gap, it will allow you to not have to take money out of depressed shares or devalued shares at an inopportune time, and allow your portfolio to still work. Portfolio becomes like a good cook or a good chef. Let it cook, right? So let that work and build the fortress around it. It doesn't need to be a, hey, we bought you a steak dinner, buy our annuity because now you're going to have this sequence of returns protection. They can help, and there's some good annuities out there. That said, don't ignore this because you don't want to be sold a product. You're going to hear that throughout the conversations that we have on this podcast is, unfortunately, our profession has created this sales environment and where we are benefiting from sales and commissions and sales objectives and instead of impact objectives. Let's turn clients into being very defensive about being sold something rather than solving an issue. But make sure that you're thinking about this because, the other thing is, it's the end of July of 2026. The market has been pretty friendly to us over the last few years. It's not always going to be this friendly. It'd be lovely if it was. Make my job a whole lot easier, would make our profession's job a whole lot easier, would make our office run a lot more smoothly if the market were always this kind to us. But it is not always going to be this friendly. And it shouldn't be the reason that you don't retire and don't enjoy your life and don't go do the things that you've been planning to do. So build the fortress around what that income gap is while you are in this time frame. Again, we're going to get into a much, much deeper conversation around sequence of returns risk. It may even be a multi-episode discussion because protecting it is so important. And I'm fearful that folks are retiring thinking the market's always going to do what it's done over the last few years. And we're here to tell you that that's not always going to be the case. And we've seen the science, and we'll get into this in the later episode, but the times when you have two identical portfolios, two identical withdrawal rates, and an identical 30-year returns can end up landing in completely different places if those returns are flipped and the bad years are in the beginning versus the bad years being at the end or in the middle. We'll get into all of that, but understanding what's happening with sequence of returns risk in your portfolio, I can't overstate that enough, that to make sure that that's something you're protecting against. Because, even Fidelity told us in a 2024 report that negative returns are more harmful early in retirement than later because the retirees misses all those years of compounding interest. And what has Einstein told us? Compounding interest is the most powerful force in the world. That sequence decides the outcome, not just the average return. You may go sit and see a presentation based on an average return and say, okay, I've just got to earn that for the rest of my retirement and everything's going to be good. And you may earn that or even better in those years of return. But I want you to think about if their first 3 years of retirement were the tech wreck in 2000, 2001, or 2002, it would have changed things a lot. If your first year of retirement was 2008, it would have changed things a lot. Each very volatile timeframes in the market, each timeframes in the market that we've fortunately recovered from. So thinking about sequence of returns risk so you don't have to suppress or self-suppress shares is important. The objective comes here is to engineer a system. Engineers are always risk analysts also. So they're creating a system that they're engineering that works in optimal conditions. But I know every good engineer is looking at that system in turbulent conditions. Every pilot learns to fly through a storm. Smooth seas don't make very good sailors. So understanding how your system works when everything's going great, and I hope it is for the next 30 years. It would be a very charmed existence as a financial advisor over the next 30 years if everything were to go smoothly. But it's our obligation to walk you through testing those sequence of returns through choppy seas. So making sure that you're understanding how to navigate that is important. And in year 3, that's your defense year. That's when you help understand how to protect what you've worked so hard for. And don't ignore this. Listen, I'm sure you've had a very decorated career, a very profitable career, a very fulfilling career. But we don't wake up every morning, get dressed, and drive to fun. We drive to work. It's been work. You've worked. Retirement's when the fun happens. Retirement is when you exhale and you travel. Year 3 is when you allow yourself to continue doing those things regardless of what's going on Wall Street, regardless of what's going on in Washington, regardless of what's going on in the markets. That's when you build those defenses, because I'm going to tell you, those things are going to happen anyway. It's not worth upending your retirement and understanding how to build those defenses is very, very important. I hope you've taken something away from this. We're going to have more content coming around these topics. We did a little bit more formal video if you want to check out our YouTube channel. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you do have any questions, I'm very active there. Or Will Hoffman. You can always reach out to our firm. Again, all of that contact information you'll find in the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast. I'm Will Hoffman. This show is Pre-Retirement Navigated, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Will Hoffman offers investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult with the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.